What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. So a lot of information's actually popped up about the next upcoming League of Legends champion, which means we do have some details that we're going to try and speculate about what we might be able to see, as well as sharing what we know for sure about the next upcoming League of Legends champion. Now honestly, I gotta say these are kind of my favorite videos to make. It's something that I really almost try to do for actually every single new champion, but it's very rare that we actually get to go through with it and make a video like this, because either by the time we have enough information to be worth making a video about, Riot usually reveals the champion like the next day or something like that before we can actually finish the video. So I'm definitely really excited to take some guesses about what the next champion is going to be. And it's worth noting that although there are definite clues here, this is kind of just like a theory speculation video, but we do definitely have a lot of confirmed information to back things up, so there is hopefully a lot of substance to what you might be able to expect. Anyway, let's jump right into it and figure out exactly what this mysterious new champion is going to be. Now, one thing that we know for sure about the next champion is that they've actually been delayed a bit when compared to the regular release schedule as far as champions go. So the next champion's actually going to be released after Galio's rework, so after the rework lands, rather than before Galio's rework as was initially intended. Riot Meddler has said that the gap between the new champion and Galio's rework is definitely going to be shorter than usual though. So once that update goes live, it's going to be time to start getting hyped up for that next champion. On the downside though, that means the next champion might not actually show up for a month or actually a couple of months. Since Riot has been putting quite a lot of focus on reworks lately, it's going to be well after the end of February before we start getting official reveals about the next champion. Now that's not going to stop Riot from giving out some hints and clues for what we can expect though, so I definitely want to shift the focus to those for now. Now, some of Riot Meddler's recent comments mentioned that Riot are intending to release a champion sometime this year who should work well in a traditional support playstyle. That means the focus for that champion is going to be on buffing or peeling for allies and hindering enemies and stuff like that, rather than putting out too much damage of their own. Now, this playstyle is not necessarily that great for champions that want to do things other than just support, but for a standard duo lane, it's definitely something that works pretty well. Out of all the Riot comments we've combed through so far about this update, a new support champion is kind of the only role that's been confirmed to be released this year, and although it's not necessarily true that this support champion in question is going to be the next one, it does lead us to believe that there is at least a pretty good possibility that the next champion released is going to be a support. And the other fairly convincing piece of evidence about the next champion being a support is the fact that it's actually been a pretty long time since we had a support champion released. Going as far back as like Kindred almost, we can work forward through the champion release timeline over the last year or more and see that the support roster hasn't really grown for actually quite a long time. We've got Kindred, the carry jungler, followed by Alawi as the new bruiser. Then we were met with Jhin, the newest AD carry, followed by Aurelion Sol and Talia, two new mages. And in the more recent months, we had another fighter for the top lane in the form of Kled, Ivern as another jungler, who was then followed by Camille. You could definitely argue that Ivern's a little bit close to being a support, or at least closer than any of the other champions we mentioned, but he definitely was not designed for the support role in mind. His focus is definitely on the jungler, so we have to go back as far as Bard or Tahm Kench to find new support champions, and they're anything but new really. They're actually 2 years old by now, so it is actually extremely likely that the next champion will be a support. So hopefully you're convinced by now that there's a really good chance that the next champion is going to be support, but what the hell is this champion actually going to look like? Now, Meddler gave us quite a lot of context to his comments about what a traditional support would look like, which does give us a pretty good idea of what to expect. Now, Riot Meddler pointed out that he called the next release a traditional support in order to distinguish that hero, him, from other champions that players also refer to as supports, the buffing or healing champions that Riot internally calls enchanters. Now, this is a major clue as to how the new champion is likely to play out, since it is essentially a confirmation that it's not going to be an enchanter kind of caster support like, say, for example, Janna, Soraka, or Lulu. We also know that the champion in question will be played in duo lanes the vast majority of the time, probably exclusively, and simply will work way better when they're teamed up with an ally in lane, which suggests a support champion much more along the lines of Alistar or Taric. It's not like you can't play those guys in the top lane, but you're always going to get more value out of their kits if you're locking people down for your marksman to be able to help them deal some damage, kite out, and stuff like that. One thing we also suspect about the new support champion is that it could actually be the champion that Riot Gypsy Lord spent the first 4 months of 2016 working on. Now, Riot Gypsy Lord mentioned way back quite a few months ago that champion that he was working on was actually meant to be his final champion at Riot, because later on he moved to a different team. He didn't actually leave Riot, just moved on to a different team. Right now I believe he's working on some of their research and development projects actually. Anyway, that champion ended up being handed off to Riot Beat Punch Beef in May. He also said that the new champion was a long way off, but he had a really exciting character that he was sure the community was going to love, and he told us 2 things about it. First up, he did leak that the champion he was working on was male, so it does lead us to believe that if this next champion is going to be a new support, and this champion in question, it's definitely going to be a male one. And secondly, it also means that this champion has yet to be released, actually. It's been 9 months now since May 2016 when the project was passed on, which does lead us to believe that it's extremely likely again for that champion in question to be the next champion released in game. We can't say for sure that this is going to be the same support champion that Riot Meddler was referring to, but it is definitely very likely, considering 9 months is pretty much exactly the timeline of development for pretty much every champion these days. Another great source of information as well that we found regarding champion development over at Riot was the dev blog post about the champions of 2016 by Riot Scruffy. At the end of the article, Riot Scruffy talks about some of the goals that the champion development team had set for 2017, and it's likely that the new champion is going to follow those goals really closely. So firstly, Riot Scruffy mentioned that Riot as a whole kind of just wants to raise the bar, raise the standard for overall champion development. He also mentioned that there are quite a lot of times in champion development where the bar actually gets permanently raised, whether it's a breakthrough in gameplay mechanics, visuals, or even just the theme and story of a character and how they tie into the world that Riot is trying to build. One of Riot's core focuses this year is to try and improve on every aspect of champion development, and that means that the champions of 2017, the new support champion included, are going to be on just a totally different level from a production standard. And this does tie in with the second goal, which is going to be delivering big surprises to their player base. With so many champions made, it can be pretty hard to keep delivering unique kits and mechanics to set aside champions from one another, but one thing to keep in mind is that there's been tons and just hundreds, maybe even thousands of mechanics that have been iceboxed and set aside from years ago, which means that there's still quite a lot of tricks that Riot hasn't shown us yet that could definitely end up being really fresh new mechanics on one of the upcoming champions. I do have to admit that the article is a bit vague, probably deliberately, but one of the other points that Riot Scruffy brushed upon was that they are actually pretty desperate for new champions to really resonate with players. It can be easy to assume that they could just do something really clever like Ivern's pacifistic jungler style, or maybe something unique like Jhin as this psychopath artisan, but that's not really enough by itself to capture the imaginations of players. 2016 was a pretty solid year for new champions, because for the most part, the champions as a whole were definitely at a higher standard. They felt a lot more polished than previous releases, but Riot's main focus for 2017 is going to make sure that all players get the chance to find a new main champion that makes the game feel really fresh for them. So as a result, it leads us to believe that they're probably going to make a lot less niche picks, the guys like Ivern and Kled and stuff like that, the champions that are maybe only for some small select audiences of the League community. They're going to make instead champions that are more widely appealing. So, a support champion that appeals to all support players rather than just a very small select few. It's worth keeping in mind that League does have a very significant core demographic, just like any other game, but the player base does have pretty different opinions on what makes a fun champion or what makes a character they can really identify with. Everyone has a champion that's just right for them, which means new champions this year are probably going to target all sorts of different corners of the community, so that it's not just a case of making 7 really cool niche champions. It's about making different champions that will really connect with tons of different players to a much more widely appealing standpoint, to where all these players can be much more excited about having a new champion to play with and potentially to even main. And to reach that point of being an iconic figure for players that's much more widely appealing, the new champion really needs to be polished in every aspect. The gameplay's got to be kind of unique, the narrative, the visuals really need to hold up to standard. So as far as our new support champion is considered, that's not going to be easy to do since the traditional support has kind of been pushed aside in favor of enchanters like Janna and Morgana or hook monsters like Blitzcrank and Thresh. I would say that it's very likely for that support champion to be closer to like the playmaking style of things, the Thresh, the Alistar, Leona type characters, stuff like that. Whatever Riot has planned for the gameplay of this new support, it's going to be something that's really engaging, interactive, and tied to a champion with a personality that players are really going to love in order to achieve their goals. Either way though, that's actually just about going to wrap up everything for today's video on what we believe the new champion is going to be, the next champion, what we know for sure. We're definitely excited for the Gallia rework as well, but new champions always just kind of have this way of just hooking you back into the game. So we're seriously interested on what Riot's going to be cooking up this time around, and I'm interested to see how it plays out. Either way, it looks like that's going to be it for me. If you guys enjoyed the video, drop a like, subscribe if you want. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.